What is the proper role for an ex-president of the United States? John Quincy Adams, lately 6th president, ponders the question at the family home in Quincy, Massachusetts. It is one on which he and his third son, Charles Francis, disagree.
This is what you should be doing, writing the history of the family, vindicating grandfather. Instead, you run back to politics at the first opportunity.
I have not said I would run. There was simply an anonymous paragraph suggesting it in the Boston Daily Courier.
They just want you out of the way when Henry Clay runs for president.
I shall not run unless the people act spontaneously.
I used to ask your advice about my own future, Father. And you always said, confine your attention to such business as you have. This room is your business. These papers are your business. This family, Father.
But my own district, Charles. My own district is my business as much as my family.
Only 2,000 people.
There are 2,500 eligible voters in the Plymouth district.
You who have been president of the entire United States?
But not elected by the people. A man cannot be degraded by serving the people as a representative in Congress.
Your mind is made up.
No, it is not. Age and infirmity have its privileges. I am not well. I have not the slightest desire to be elected to Congress.
It is too much to ask, Mr. Adams, that I return to public life and renew all the mortification and the agony.
But I have been chosen, Louisa.
Oh, to gratify your insatiable passion for public office.
I did not seek it. I did nothing. I was chosen.
You consented to run.
Only after being nominated. I didn't work for it. The work was done by 1,817 voters from 22 towns, Louisa. 3/4 of the total vote. Majority is undeniable. Oh, no election, no appointment conferred upon me has ever given me half so much pleasure. I can't expect you to understand.
What of your health? You no longer have the protection of the executive office, you know. Old enemies, old wounds, old scores to settle. Can you physically bear it?
My condition has remarkably improved since reading today's newspaper. Besides, I'm thinking of the $8 per day I shall receive for each session of Congress.
Is $8 a day that important?
Plus 40 cents per mile travel allowance. Don't forget that.
Mr. Adams, it will not be so very difficult for me. I promise. In truth, it will revive me to be back in Washington, away from this climate in Quincy.
It was kind of you to come tonight, Mr. Adams. I know you are preparing to leave for Washington.
I understand, Monsieur de Tocqueville, that you are in this country making an official study of penology. Mr. Everett said you expressly wanted to meet me. I couldn't imagine why. I had to come and find out.
Of penology, yes, but of democracy also.
What is it you wish to ask me?
Do you regard slavery as a great evil for the United States?
Yes, unquestionably. It's in slavery that are to be found almost all of the embarrassments of the present and fears of the future.
Is the number of slaves increasing?
Why have you chosen to ask me these things?
You are in a nationally conspicuous position.
There are others far more conspicuous.
Why are you surprised that I should ask you about slavery?
Because I've never spoken publicly on the subject.
Perhaps that is the reason?
And is that the reason I'm being asked to present anti-slavery petitions to Congress weeks before I've taken my seat?
Will you?
Oh, yes. I will present the petitions. That doesn't mean I will support them or recommend any action.
That is in keeping with your stand in the past of not taking a stand. But do I sense in your silence an inner abhorrence to the practice of slavery?
That may well be. All 15 of these petitions make the same two pleas, that of the abolition of the slave trade and of slavery itself in the District of Columbia. I don't intend to read all 15. Not so much out of consideration for my fellow members of the House, but because I am not yet used to the sound of my own voice in this chamber. I move that these petitions be referred to the Committee on the District of Columbia with instructions to report the expediency of prohibiting the slave trade in the District of Columbia.
Are we to infer that the gentleman from Massachusetts does not instruct the committee to consider the plea for abolition of slavery itself?
I don't trust my own voice after such long disuse. I have said enough in my first speech before this august assemblage. I am grateful for the privilege.
Before the House.
Oh, it's been read 3 times.
Mr. Pinckney.
3. All petitions, memorials, resolutions, propositions, or papers relating in any way or to any extent whatsoever to the subject of slavery or the abolition of slavery shall be tabled, and that no further action whatever shall be taken.
Yes. I repeat, am I gagged or am I not?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has brought such a resolution upon himself by his incessant introduction of such petitions into this House.
I hold this resolution to be in direct violation of the Constitution of the United States, to the rules of this House, and to the rights of my constituents.
Congress has no constitutional power to interfere in any way with slavery in any of the states.
And it should not interfere in any way with slavery in the District of Columbia.
Yes.
Gentlemen, there seems to be some feeling that I am attempting to introduce the subject of abolition into the House.
Exactly what he's doing.
It is true that some petitioners, keenly aggrieved by the existence of slavery in a part of the country over which Congress possesses exclusive jurisdiction in all matters whatsoever, do seek its abolition in the District of Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to a point of order.
And to declare every human being free that steps foot on his soil.
Mr. Adams.
But, gentlemen, there was, for example, a petition from a group of slaves, which I was not permitted to read because it was from slaves, and which I do not intend to read, but which was actually a prayer against abolition. Slaves were afraid of losing their bondage. They pleaded for the continuance of the institution of slavery. They desired to serve their masters for as long as life will permit. Now, since I endeavored to introduce that petition along with all the others, it cannot be said that I am taking up the cause of abolition on this floor. I am not objecting to Mr. Pinckney's resolution because it impedes the progress of abolition. I am objecting to it because it interferes with the rights of my constituents to petition.
Mr. Adams, take your seat. We will now proceed with the vote. Will all those in favor of Mr. Pinckney's resolution signify by raising their right hand?
It was the wretched Mills that killed John. They have eaten into this family like gangrene. That is not my own bitterness speaking. The word gangrene is your father's epithet. John would not give up, even in suffering and acute pain. We begged him to leave Washington and rest at Quincy. Even your father begged him. As you see, I forced myself to give your father every consideration. He implored John to leave the mills. But John was an Adams. He persevered in his duty until it killed him.
You must try not to blame Father.
And now there's still $30,000 owing on his son's grave. For that is what the mills had become, John's grave. And herein lies the young, the beautiful, the wise.
You must go forward, Aunt Louisa.
How can I when life itself does not go forward, only backward? It repeats itself. John's death, George's.
Mother?
If time is not going backwards, then what are we doing in this house? We left it forever when we went to the president's mansion. That was to be the end of this house. After the president's mansion, we were to go. I don't know where. All I know is that time has gone backwards and we've returned to this house. Did you know this house is mortgaged?
Yes, Mother.
And do you know why? To buy the Columbia Mills. To buy my son's grave. We're mortgaged souls in a mortgaged house.
I must go, Mother.
Of course you must. Back to Boston. Thank you, my dear, for coming.
Will you be all right?
Mary's with me, and my grandchildren. As long as they're in this house, I'm all right.
You have Father here.
Charles, even though I must watch his strength and health ebb away, even though I must sacrifice my son, even then, I'm forced to admit that he is right.
Goodbye, Mother.
In the mutiny of the slaves, which took place off Cuba, the captain of the ship Amistad was murdered, as was the cook. The Negro mutineers spared the lives of their Spanish owners on condition that they steer the ship eastward in the direction of Africa. This the two Spaniards did by day, but by night they turned the ship westward toward the United States. Eventually they found themselves in Long Island Sound, where the slaves were taken into custody. Mr. Adams,
Oh, forgive me, Mr. Tappan, forgive me. I have been in correspondence with Mr. James H. Hackett regarding Shakespeare's tragedy of Hamlet. And this is a lithographic copy of my letter. Send to me by Mr. Hackett. Examine it, Mr.
I came here to discuss the plight of the Amistad survivors.
It is so perfect a facsimile that if it had been presented to me as the original, I should have acknowledged it without an instant of hesitation as my own.
Mr. Adams...
Mr. Hackett says that he had the copy taken because he had lent the original to so many of his friends and acquaintances, and that it had been nearly used up. You used the word slaves, Mr. Tappan.
I beg your pardon.
In referring to the Negroes on the Amistad. You used the word slaves. The men were not, in fact, slaves, as I understand it.
They had been kidnapped from Africa, taken to Cuba, where they were sold in the slave market.
Which was illegal, according to all existing treaties.
Quite correct.
And therefore, the two Spaniards were not their owners. In other words, you used.
I was trying to convey the position of the Spanish minister.
Who claimed that the Negroes should be returned to their owners as shipwrecked property.
That is Spain's position. The lower courts have ruled against them. Now they have appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. That is why I've come to you, Mr. Adams for help.
Well, it seems more than likely that the Supreme Court will simply affirm the rulings of the lower courts.
Look, the Spaniards have added ammunition. They now demand the return of the Africans to Havana, Cuba, to be tried under Spanish law. The Supreme Court may feel compelled to reverse all previous rulings. We cannot allow that to happen, Mr. Adams.
Is this another of your attempts to enlist me openly in the cause of abolition, Mr. Tappan?
You profess indifference to the fate of the Armistead survivors, but I've seen a letter in your hand expressing hope that no grand jury of free men could be found to indict the Africans for vindicating their own liberty against slave traders, pirates.
I believe you refer to a letter I wrote to Mr. William J.
I do, sir.
That was a private letter.
You needn't fear, Mr. Adams. He has had no lithographic copies made.
Well, we know how the Spaniards have been occupying their time. What of the Negroes?
They are in the New Haven County Jail.
And you want me to represent them in the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well, this is a case of life and death for these unfortunate men.
I'm an old man.
Your age is a matter of public record.
You'll admit that I'm an old man.
Old man, eloquent. That's what they call you.
I think I wanted you to tell me that. Vanity. Mr. Hackett actually wants my opinions on the tragedy of Othello. That extension of my fame is more tickling to my vanity than it was to be the President of the United States. And you too, Mr. Tappan. You are appealing to my vanity.
Good morning, sir.
Are you still here? Or have you gone away and come back?
Mr. Baldwin and Professor Gibbs are waiting to give you breakfast in the hotel dining room. Did you rest well, sir?
I didn't rest at all. I've been reading.
You should have rested. You've had a long train ride and practically in the middle of the night.
When you have lived as long as I have with no trains at all, 2.5 hours from Hartford to New Haven is expeditious to the point of being egregious. I feel I am as wrongfully put here as you are. Shouldn't you be in class? It's after 9 o'clock.
If you will forgive me, sir. Escorting Mr. John Quincy Adams through the lobby of the Tontine Hotel is far more instructional than any course offered in the curriculum of Yale College.
Oh. It was good of you to meet me at the railroad station. More than kind to bring me to my hotel, but I am quite all right now, I assure you.
The life of Mr. John Quincy Adams must be spared to his country to carry on the struggle for free men.
You think I might not reach the dining room?
I did not know until this morning, sir, that there had been threats on your life. I heard a man in the lobby say that you had deserted the abolitionist cause under threats of assassination.
Well, when did I do that?
When you asserted in the House of Representatives that abolition could only be effected through constitutional amendment.
There were threats of assassination, but that is not the reason I said it. I said it because I believe it.
The man in the lobby threatened to make away with you if you said anything further that sounded like a denunciation of abolitionism.
Yes, well, in the South, they threatened me for doing too much, and in the North, they threatened me for doing too little. Oh, very well, young man. I accept your protection.
Suppose a white man from Algiers escaped ashore in the United States, and his dark-skinned Algerine owners demanded his return. Because by the laws of Algiers, white men may be treated as property. No court in the United States, no court in all of Christendom would entertain such a claim. And when we find them here from the coast of Africa, the same rule must apply to the black as to the white.
I have read your admirable brief, Mr. Baldwin.
Well, when did you find the time? You've only just arrived at 8 o'clock this morning.
It's been the routine of my life to do the bulk of my reading before breakfast. And an excellent breakfast, too.
You make me a little ashamed I wasn't able to meet your train.
I was well met. Will I be able to communicate with the Africans?
Professor Gibbs?
Oh, yes. By visiting them every day, I was able to learn the word sounds for the first 10 numerals. Then, by haunting the waterfront here in New Haven and talking to African seamen, I was able to learn that they were members of the Mendi tribe, and at last I found an interpreter.
Professor Gibbs has been compiling a dictionary of their language and teaching them English.
Their leader, Cinque, is even able to read aloud from the New Testament.
Well, gentlemen, if you are ready.
Wouldn't you like to rest after your meal, Mr. Adams? It's a 2-mile ride.
Once I start on my day, Mr. Baldwin, it is better not to stop.
All right. Then let me help you.
Oh, no.
The peacemaker, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Does he understand what he just read?
Dear Mr. Adams, peacemaker.
He understands that much, sir.
Beba, inge lokosha tajisha, kole longe ma tamuma.
What do you say?
Your hands are shaking. He wishes to know if you too find the New England winter too cold.
Tell him it is the winter of life that affects me.
He would not understand that, sir. Connie, you may speak. Is there something you wish to say to Mr. Adams?
Dear friend, Mr. Adams, you have children and friends. You love them. You feel very sorry if Mendi take all to Africa. Ship cook say he kill, he eat Mendi. We afraid. We kill ship cook. We never kill captain, but he want to kill us. You love us. You talk to the American court, the great court, and tell the American people, make us free. Dear friend, Mr. Adams, we love you very much.
Thank you. Do they understand the expression, thank you?
I think so. They just don't hear it very often.
Lock up.
There will be a messenger from the British minister.
At this late hour?
The British minister wishes to know what Her Majesty's government can do captured Africans.
Well, what can anyone do? But didn't you say the decision of the Supreme Court would be against them?
They can invoke the Treaty of Ghent, Article 10. Whereas the traffic of slaves is irreconcilable with the principles of humanity and justice, and whereas both His Majesty and the United States are desirous of continuing their efforts to promote its entire abolition, British minister must have this before the trial begins in the morning.
I'll let you know when the messenger arrives.
I, the last of your charges, to be awake, Mary?
Aunt Louisa is resting quietly. So is Mary Louisa.
Is your Aunt Louisa in correspondence with Charles?
Oh, yes. Charles is most proud to have been elected to the state legislature, and by such a large majority.
He was so afraid that I might embarrass him in his new political career.
I think he does feel easier now that he's been elected.
Oh, there's still time. I might embarrass him yet. I am very clear as to what the British minister should do. Would I were half so clear as to what I myself should do. I find myself rearranging documents with no clear frame for my argument.
Then you must extemporize. Well, that is what you have become known for.
Yes, quite a contradiction in my character. After an entire political career, planning every move, every word, to find myself embarked on a second political career, not knowing what I'm going to say next.
Extemporize.
Mr. Adams, will your presence in the Supreme Court interfere with the presentation of further petitions in the House of Representatives?
Only insofar as I am unable to be in two places at one time.
I have a petition here from 45 citizens of Haverhill, Massachusetts, sir. Your own state, sir.
These are the skeleton, my argument. I confess I haven't put it all together. So bewildered, Mr. Baldwin, as to leave me nothing but fervent prayer that presence of mind may not utterly fail me. Well, the courtroom's full. Not many ladies.
One of the judges of this court, Philip B. Barber, is dead. He sat with us in consultation last evening until 10 o'clock, when we parted from him in remarkably cheerful good humor. He appears to have passed from sleep to death without a moment of conscious suffering. The court will adjourn until Monday morning.
He was 15 years younger than I.